In June 2020, a company worth more than Deutsche Bank admitted that 1.9 billion euros, nearly a quarter of its balance sheet, probably didn't exist. Within a week, its CEO was in handcuffs, its COO had disappeared, and Germany's most celebrated fintech champion was bankrupt. But the fraud wasn't the most extraordinary part of the story. The extraordinary part is how long the system protected it. To understand how Wirecard collapsed, you have to understand how completely Germany believed in it. Wirecard started in 1999 as a small payment processing firm based outside Munich. For most of its early life, it operated in the unglamorous back end of digital transactions, processing payments for businesses most banks didn't want to touch. It was obscure, unremarkable, and mostly ignored. Then Markus Braun took over. Braun was an Austrian technologist with a vision that fit the moment perfectly. He positioned Wirecard not as a payment processor, but as a fintech disruptor, a company that would challenge the dominance of Europe's legacy banking infrastructure. And Europe, desperate for a tech champion to rival Silicon Valley, was ready to believe him. The growth numbers were extraordinary. Revenue climbed year after year. Margins expanded. International operations, particularly across Asia, appeared to be generating enormous returns. By 2018, Wirecard's market capitalization had surpassed Commerzbank, and the company was invited into the DAX 30, Germany's most prestigious stock index. A fintech company replacing a 150-year-old bank. It was the narrative Germany wanted. Innovation triumphing over tradition. But inside that narrative, the numbers were being manufactured. The first public challenge came from short sellers. As early as 2008, investors betting against Wirecard raised questions about accounting irregularities and opaque subsidiary structures, particularly in Asia. Wirecard dismissed them as market manipulators trying to profit from a falling stock price. The German financial press largely agreed. Then the Financial Times got involved. Starting in 2015 and accelerating through 2019, journalist Dan McCrum published a series of investigations that methodically dismantled Wirecard's claims. McCrum and his team identified fabricated revenue from third-party partners across Southeast Asia, forged contracts, and a pattern of round-tripping transactions designed to inflate the company's top line. The reporting was specific, sourced, and damning. Wirecard's response was not to address the allegations, it was to attack. The company hired former intelligence operatives and corporate surveillance firms to investigate McCrum personally. Wirecard publicly accused the Financial Times of conspiring with short sellers to drive down the stock. And then something extraordinary happened. Germany's own financial regulator, BaFin, intervened. Not against Wirecard, against the journalists. BaFin filed a criminal complaint against Financial Times reporters for suspected market manipulation. It simultaneously imposed a 2-month ban on short-selling Wirecard stock, the first time the regulator had ever taken such action to protect a single company. The message was unmistakable. The German state had chosen a side, and it chose wrong. By late 2019, the pressure had become impossible to contain. Wirecard's board, under mounting scrutiny, commissioned KPMG to conduct a special independent audit. It was meant to put the allegations to rest. It did the opposite. KPMG's report, published in April 2020, concluded that Wirecard had failed to provide sufficient documentation to verify revenues from its third-party acquiring business, the exact segment the Financial Times had been investigating for 5 years. The auditors couldn't confirm that Wirecard's most important revenue stream was real. Still, the company survived another 2 months. Braun insisted Wirecard would pass its annual audit. The board held firm. The market waited. On June 18, 2020, the waiting ended. EY, Wirecard's long-standing auditor, refused to sign off on the 2019 financial statements. The reason? 1.9 billion euros in cash balances, supposedly held in escrow accounts at 2 Philippine banks, could not be verified. EY stated that there were clear indications that false balance confirmations had been provided. The following day, the 2 Philippine banks confirmed what the numbers already showed. The accounts did not exist. The money had never been there. Wirecard's stock lost over 90% of its value in 48 hours. On June 25th, the company filed for insolvency. The entire edifice, the DAX 30 listing, the Fintech champion narrative, the billions in market value, collapsed in a single week. Markus Braun was arrested on June 23rd. His trial, one of the largest financial fraud cases in German post-war history, began in late 2022 in Munich. Jan Marsalek, Wirecard's chief operating officer, the executive who had personally overseen the Asian operations at the center of the fraud, disappeared on June 19th. The day after EY refused to certify the accounts. He has not been seen publicly since. Intelligence officials and investigators believe he fled first to Belarus and then to Russia, possibly with the assistance of foreign intelligence services. His whereabouts remain officially unknown. EY, which had audited Wirecard for over a decade, faced immediate scrutiny. The firm had never independently verified the Philippine bank balances, a basic audit procedure. For years, EY had accepted screenshots and scanned documents as evidence that 1.9 billion euros existed in those accounts. The German parliament investigated. Lawsuits followed. But EY was never formally charged. BaFin, the regulator that had protected Wirecard and targeted its critics, was restructured. Its president was forced out. New legislation expanded oversight authority and introduced accountability measures that hadn't existed before. But the underlying failure, a regulator that functioned as an ally of the company it was supposed to police, had already done its damage. Wirecard is often described as a failure of auditing, and it was. It's described as a failure of regulation, and it was that too. But those explanations are incomplete. The deeper pattern is about what happens when an institution becomes too valuable to question. Wirecard wasn't just a company. It was proof that Germany could compete with Silicon Valley. It was a national narrative. And national narratives create gravitational fields that bend the behavior of every institution that comes near them. Regulators stop regulating. Auditors stop auditing. Journalists who challenge the story get investigated instead of the company. This is the architecture of sustained fraud. The fraud itself is almost never sophisticated. Wirecard's was remarkably crude. Forged bank statements, phantom customers, fictional revenue. What sustains it is the ecosystem of complicity around it. The investors who don't ask questions because the returns are too good. The regulators who treat skepticism as an attack on the national interest. The auditors who accept evidence they never verify because the client is too important to lose. The 1.9 billion euros that never existed were not hidden by Wirecard alone. They were hidden by every institution that had a reason not to look. Wirecard was valued at 24 billion euros the year it joined the DAX. Its actual value was a fraction of what it claimed. The difference between those two numbers wasn't created by clever accounting. It was created by a system that rewarded belief and punished doubt. That system didn't collapse with Wirecard. It's still operating.